be aware, you went from ESPN Boston to NBC Sports Boston, which means we're seeing a whole lot more of you. How are you enjoying it?
Yeah, listen, it was I won't try and hide from it. It ruined my summer. It was a really tough decision, and my wife and my kids were unfailingly patient with me because I really wrestled with what was the best move for my future. And I think like anything, when you go into something new, you're not sure how it's going to go. But I do think it's exceeded all my expectations. And, man, it's just a thrill. I don't think when I got into this business, I thought I'd be on TV very much. And the opportunities here have been bountiful, and it's been really fun to be a part of and working with. The people there are just so good, in every level. And they make it so easy on you. And so it's been really great. And getting to do sideline the other night, listen, I don't know if they'll ever let me do it again after that performance, but it was just it was truly a pinch me moment to sort of do that and be like, I can't believe they trusted me to do this. And so that's been really cool. And I can't thank the people enough over there for sort of having the confidence to throw me out there. Our director, Paul Lucy, and Kevin Miller, and everybody, they've shown an awful lot of confidence in me, probably confidence I didn't have in myself.
Well, it seems like, too, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but, you're over at ESPN, which most people assume, be it on-air talent, writer, whatever you're doing, that's the dream job. That's where you want to be. You want to be at the worldwide leader. And so you go to NBC Sports Boston, and I'm seeing a lot more of, you're posting pictures, whether it's to promote Post Up or I'm going to be on Early Edition or Boston Sports Tonight or, just shots around the newsroom, whatever it may be. And I don't know, maybe there's a part of you that's trying to be a little more upfront just to catch people up, make sure they're totally aware, hey, this is where I am now. But it also seems like you're just genuinely enjoying this position, this job, this role more than what you were doing before. Taking nothing away from what you were doing, ESPN's great. But it seems like, I don't know, this one maybe on a more personal level, like you said, the pinch me moment doing sideline, you're just having a little more fun.
Yeah, I would say the one thing that struck me, even when I was sort of just doing it on the side while I was at ESPN, was that I would go into my local coffee shop, and I live out in the middle of nowhere, and not to say that people in Central Mass don't watch Celtics games, but the guy behind the register would be like, "Oh, I saw you on TV last night," and I'd say, "Oh, you watch ESPN?" And he goes, "No, I saw you on NBC Sports," and I was like, "Oh, okay," and that just kept kind of happening, and I think it speaks to sort of, listen, everyone watches ESPN, and it was being on that program was amazing, but in this market, especially, I think Boston specifically, people are so rabid about sports that they watch the local programming a lot. And so it's been really cool to see how many people have reached out and said stuff. And so, when I go into that, what I always joke about is a lot of the ESPN stuff I did from my house, and I'd be sitting there in my underpants and a sports jacket and my little iPhone camera. I couldn't really take any pictures behind the scenes of that. So now when I'm in the studio and we're having fun and we're joking around, it's neat to sort of show people what we're doing. I hope that translates because, listen, I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and I hope that translates in how we're approaching the coverage.
Well, look, you're a guy covering the Celtics at the flagship home of the Celtics. It doesn't get much better than that. So let's talk about this team, Chris, because as I said off the hop, inconsistency, and I do want to acknowledge for people that are listening. This show is being recorded prior to these final two games of the homestand against the Raptors, against the Jazz. There are different reasons that go into that, but it's being recorded on a Friday. It's released on a Sunday. I recognize the team could go out and just beat the hell out of Toronto and Utah, and all of a sudden 3-0 homestand, and that changes how people feel in that given moment. But one thing that is maybe good, unique, big picture-y about this show being a once-a-week show is that we're more concerned with those larger focus items. So 2 games, be it 2 wins, 2 losses, a split, isn't going to, at least for me, overly impact things. So let's talk about where this team is as you see it right now. Its identity under Brad Stevens, because that's always been driven by defense, driven by toughness. Statistically, that's still the case, but to the naked eye, again, very up and down.
Yeah, and I think that it goes that with both sides of the ball, right? We've seen these flashes and glimpses on offense, like that first quarter in Denver. You're thinking, wow, there's the Celtics we thought we'd see. And like you said, the numbers bear it out. But even Brad sitting there this week and saying, people tell me we're the number one defense, but, I'm not sure I believe it with my eyes. they've given up some big games to individual talents, right? Like Oladipo pretty much single-handedly beat them there at the finish line in Indiana, and them not stepping up defensively there was frustrating. But Booker had some nice moments there in Phoenix, and then Lillard and clearly Jamal Murray in Denver. So one of the encouraging signs the other night when Chicago comes to town is like, listen, Zach LaVine had been really good at the start of the year, 20-plus points in 14 straight games. Something only Michael Jordan had done for the Bulls. And so the Celtics stepped up there, had probably what I thought was their best defensive game of the year, because even Aaron Baines and Shemi coming off the bench are like giving the team a little extra. If they do that on a night-to-night basis, they're going to give themselves every opportunity to win, no matter how the offense is playing. And if the offense is clicking, then they're going to be really good. And so I do think that they just needed a game like that. And listen, maybe I'll be sitting here and saying, all right, it was, they got smushed by the Raptors and Jazz. They didn't mean anything. But I think more likely than not, it's just going to restore their confidence a little bit. And I just feel like once they get out of their own heads, a lot of that inconsistency will start to go away.
Something that, to me, Chris, really can't be talked about enough, and you wrote about it as well. Kyrie Irving, he made headlines after that ugly 1-4 road trip when he said the C's needed more leadership, basically.
Right now, I think that it would be nice if we had someone that was a 15-year vet, 14-year vet that could, just kind of help us brace along the regular season and understand that it's a long marathon rather than just a full-on sprint of just, when you want to play, when you want to do what you want to do.
All right, and then after a blowout of the Bulls back home, as you talked about, he kind of clarified those comments.
I think I was speaking in general for where we are as a team in terms of what we have in here as a group, and I was speaking to the responsibility that's put on me as well as Al, as well as Mook and Gordon to be the leaders of this team, and we're all relatively young as well. Al's the oldest out of all of us, but he's 13 years in, 12 years in. I think I was speaking just in general is obviously there's a lot of movement going on in the league as usual around this time, but I wasn't speaking to anyone specific. I just was speaking to a vet that has been through a few championship runs, that's able to be patient with this team as well as understand what we're going through of just figuring out the pieces and how they mesh well together. That's all.
So among those moves, naturally people point to Carmelo Anthony. He's done in Houston now. It can't technically be traded yet, but he could be waived and then signed elsewhere and whatever. We can talk about Melo a little bit later. You can acknowledge him here if you want to. But for every you start to think about those impactful vets that come in. And for every, P.J. Brown or Sam Cassell, there's also a Michael Finley and a Stephon Marbury. My feeling is the guy that Irving is describing should be him. I mean, he's been around a while, not that long, but he's been around a while. He's had championship runs. He's hit the biggest shot in finals history. He knows how to win a title. And if not him, it's Al Horford. He's been in the league for a dozen years. So where did these comments come from to you? Because while I'm not sure it's intended this way, they sort of sound like excuses for poor performance. Yeah,
no doubt. And I think in the heat of the moment, at the end of a frustrating 1-4 road trip, and where you fail to come back, where you race a 21-point deficit but don't get over the hump there at the finish line, I think a lot of those guys were frustrated. It was Marcus Smart who sort of had the outburst in the locker room and tried to light a little bit of a fire under these guys. And I think what Kyrie probably intended, and, again, Kyrie goes off on these long tangents, and sometimes,
he rambles.
He gets lost on his way. Yeah, and I think what I took away from the comments initially was guys are frustrated. He wished that there was a voice in that locker room that could say, hey, guys, this happens. But I'm with you. That's got to be Kyrie. I know he's sort of my guess is he's a quiet leader based on what I've, seen and what I've heard. But I do think there are instances where he needs to be that voice that says, hey, guys, listen, I've won a title. I've won a gold medal. You're going to hit these rough patches, but we're going to be okay. But here's what we need to do. And I think he probably recognized that in the time once it became a story, he probably said, oh, man, now everyone thinks I want to go get Carmelo. That's going to solve anything. And so I think what, in walking it back, he probably should have been a little bit more firm about hey, it's up to me, it's up to Al, it's up to all these guys. Even the young guys have a voice in this locker room. They can feel free to step up and voice that. But yeah, I think overall, I don't think he was trying to posture for some sort of addition. It wouldn't surprise me if we get to February or whatever the waiver deadline is, and the Celtics are looking around at what's out there. But just like you said, it's such a low hit rate in terms of guys that come in and can actually be impactful that sometimes I think what the Celtics used to do is just sign some 20-year-old kid who they wanted for like the G League over the summer and to work with the team. Sometimes it's better to fill your roster spots with that type than to try and get a vet and try to figure out how they mesh and whether you can play them. And, listen, Brad's already got enough headaches trying to figure out how these rotations work. I don't think we need to figure out how to add another body there. It's the least of which would be Carmelo Anthony and his terrible play at this point of his career.
It's funny. Of all the things that I thought about and talked about on this show and with others and on Twitter or wherever over the course of the summer, concerns, and there were some, certainly on paper or fighting for minutes or whatever it may be. One of them for me was never really leadership, especially because, I think the world of my adopted dad, Brad Stevens, and I love, obviously, a lot of the guys on this team. But something you brought up and something that Kyrie maybe inadvertently acknowledged is, are there too many quiet leaders? He's a quiet leader. Al Horford strikes me as a quiet leader. Jaylen Brown, to whatever degree he's a leader, is a quiet guy. Gordon Hayward certainly would be in that quiet leader category. Jason Tatum is at a point in his career where absolutely not a fiery guy. He's a quiet leader. And Brad Stevens himself is not someone that, at least outwardly, I don't know what it's like in the locker room when he's upset, but, there are only so many gosh darns to go around. He's not going to yell and scream at these guys. So you all of a sudden look to a guy like Marcus Smart, who's 24, or maybe Marcus Morris, who's not going to be around all that long, probably this year, and then see you later. Are there... Do they need to bring in a guy that isn't so much the 15-year vet like Kyrie said, who's won a championship, but just someone that's going to force these guys to just cut loose a little bit, to take ownership of whatever it may be, to set their hair on fire? Because Irving, in that second clip I played, he named a whole bunch of guys. He didn't name Marcus Smart, and the guy that falls into that category here is Smart. So do they not look at him as having that potential?
So I think what it is again, if this becomes a pattern where they have these stretches of inconsistency and where guys keep saying like, we need someone to step up and be a leader, then I think you get to the point where, maybe that's when Danny Ainge has to say, okay, there needs to be another voice in this locker room. I think it's big on Marcus Smart that, I still can't believe he's only 24 years old. Like when you think about being the longest tenured Celtic, and, good on him because, I asked him the other day, I said, would you have felt comfortable doing that 2 or 3 years ago? And he's like, yeah, it's just that's who Marcus Smart is. He was raised to, if he felt people weren't living up to expectations, to tell them. And I think sometimes people in that locker room need to hear that. And so I was curious, because even Marcus said, I hope guys didn't take it the wrong way, because I want them to just know, like, this is unacceptable. We're too good to let this be the way we're playing. And right before they went out for practice that day, Kyrie came over, dapped them up, had a little conversation, and smiles, and off they went. So that's an encouraging sign to me that it's okay for a young guy to step up and have a voice in that locker room. And I will be interested to see if that develops. Does Jaylen Brown accept more of that role? Does, Ken Tatum, who is just quiet in general, can he have a voice in a locker room like that? Does Hayward step forward now that he's more a part of this mix than necessarily last year? I don't think it's necessary for them to have that sort of firm voice. I think about, like, okay, the Warriors. Who's the voice in that locker room? Like, Draymond probably yells and screams, and but like Durant and Curry and Clay, they all strike me as maybe quieter leaders. So I think you can have a mix where, as long as there's enough respect in that room to listen to what everybody says, and that's sort of the environment that Brad fosters. So I just think it can work, and there's no reason to think it won't. I just, again, like Kyrie's comment struck me as someone who was really frustrated that the Celtics had put themselves in this position, there was no obvious answer to their struggles and their inconsistencies. And so they were just sort of grasping at, like, how do we make this better? And what it comes down to is really they just got to play harder.
Quick break from Adam and Chris to tell you today's show is brought to you by Casper. Casper is a sleep brand that makes expertly designed products to help you get your best sleep one night at a time. You spend 1/3 of your life sleeping. Why be uncomfortable? Casper products are designed with you in mind. Everything they make supports any type of body. Not sure what mattress is right for you? Start with the original Casper. With over 20,000 reviews, it is quickly becoming the internet's favorite mattress. The Casper is equipped with multiple triple supportive memory foams, and it regulates your body temperature through the night. And Casper sells more than just mattresses. They also sell sheets. They sell pillows to ensure a better overall sleep experience. And they do it all at affordable prices because they sell directly to you. And you can be sure of your purchase with Casper's 100-night risk-free sleep-on trial. If you don't like it, no sweat. Free shipping and returns to customers in the U.S. and Canada. What are you waiting for? Get $50 off today's select mattresses by going to Casper.com/Celtics and using the promo code Celtics at checkout. Again, $50 off select mattresses by going to Casper.com/Celtics. Use the promo code Celtics at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
Really is one of the things with Smart, and I sense you're the same way. I adore Marcus Smart, like to the point where I even enjoy his 52 million song kind of a little bit.
52, got 52 M. I call my bro, he got 52 M. Been in the gym, done 52 rounds.
You know, I think I do. I think I love the guy. I think you need to have a guy like that on a championship caliber team. But, you know, I wonder, one thing that was really good about that comment that he made was that, you know, you think back in the last couple of years where things haven't gone right, and not to call them out, but to call them out. You know, Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, guys instantly in postgame, they're frustrated and they're pointing at Brad Stevens to, well, we got to think about the rotations and our substitution patterns and blah, blah, blah. Smart comes out and says, look, don't look at Brad. He's got a job to do, sure, but we got to go out and execute it. And we're not doing our jobs right now. And it's refreshing to hear a guy, especially such a young guy, say that.
Yeah, and so listen, you got to have people like that can step up in front of the microphones and acknowledge that too. Kyrie's been good. He talks after every game, and you know, again, he might ramble and take a while to get to his point, but you know, he's pretty good about delivering that sort of message about where the state of the union and where the team is. But you need guys to sort of be okay with acknowledging publicly, like, hey, we're not playing right, and we need to be better, and this isn't acceptable. And it's okay for guys to say that. Listen, I'm the same way. Anybody else raps about their contract extension, it probably drives everybody crazy. Marcus, for some reason, it's just like, that's just Marcus. You know, when I saw a Celtic player was on TMZ, I said, oh, no, this isn't going to be good. And then I was like, well, that's probably the most innocuous way you could be on TMZ right. as a player. So we'll let it slide. You know, if this is part of the reason that the Celtics were willing to commit that much money to Marcus Smart, and they've still got some tough decisions moving forward in terms of, you know, is he your guy? Is he your backup guy? Is Terry Rozier? How is that all going to work with the money that Terry's going to command over the summer? But you know, that's the sort of intangible that Marcus brings, not only with the way he plays on the court, but what he gives you off the court as well. That
song came out, my first thought, and it was probably something similar to like what your colleague DJ Bean would say about it if he hasn't already, part of the CLNS family as well with his brunch podcast. What would Smart's song have sounded like if it was like 51.5 million? Like, does he just round up? It's not, does he round? It's not nearly as catchy.
It would be tough, but that's what makes it tough.
Yeah, you know, look, he's an artist. A guy that we've talked about quite a bit here. And again, we'll see what he does in the next couple of games before this show is released. But Jaylen Brown picked up his aggressiveness after a very slow start and acknowledging that he's settling for too many jumpers. He's not going to the rim. It seemed like I don't know, his early season struggles have, you almost in watching associate that with him not really being able to figure out where he fits in this offense now that Gordon Hayward's back. And we thought, at least coming in, that Marcus Morris was going to be the guy that felt that way when, in fact, he's been terrific and insanely comfortable. So what's been the issue with Brown? What's the issue or what's the key to getting him comfortable again, you think?
Yeah, I think with Jaylen, it's just he had the most unclear role. Like, you add Hayward in, they do a lot of the same things, but both that Hayward, Tatum, Brown trio sort of, you know, had to figure out, all right, well, where are my shots coming from? Where am I supposed to be? I think that was an adjustment for all three of them. And then you factor in, you got little issues for all of them. You got Hayward coming back from this injury, and everyone's trying so hard to get him going. You got Tatum, who's, you know, sort of hears all the press clippings in the summer and on the cover of Slam magazine and ESPN magazine, and knows that he's sort of on the cusp of superstardom. And how does he make sure he takes that jump? And then you got Jaylen, who made probably more progress in year 2 than most of us expected. We're sort of wondering what that ceiling is for him. And they're all just sort of walking on eggshells, I felt like. And people look at Jason Tatum's shot selection and say he wasn't doing that. But I do think that just the guys weren't just sort of letting their natural talents take over and do what they do best. They were sort of forcing everything. I think that's led to a lot of the inconsistencies for that starting group. Now that Gordon Hayward's minutes are starting to stretch out a little bit, I think that takes a little bit of the pressure off everything. I think we saw in the Bulls game that Jaylen, when he's aggressive, when he goes to the basket, when he takes advantage of his athleticism, he's just a different player. And I felt like the team was different. I think it's just, it's like all of a sudden Jaylen's going, everybody else feels like, all right, here we go. Like this is, let's just do what we do. And that's a really encouraging sign. But they need that. Like, it might just be a situation where as Jaylen goes, so go the Celtics. Like, if he's comfortable, if he's making those corner threes when he's open, if he's attacking the basket and being one of the few guys that can actually get to the line, like, those are all good things. And I think mentally he just needed a good game. And so we'll see if he can build off of it. But to me, he's really important moving forward here on both ends of the floor and getting everyone going. And like, if the Celtics are going to be as good as they possibly can be, while we sort of look at Jaylen as maybe, I guess he's the fifth guy on that starting lineup. Like, if you're going to rank, like, in terms of importance, like, he's still, to me, he's a very important fifth guy on that lineup.
One thing that's been interesting as it relates to that is, I think Jay King in The Athletic wrote this piece, that everybody's net rating when they're not playing with Gordon Hayward is better. And it's just so much worse when Hayward's on the floor. And part of that, as you said, speaks to trying to get him involved, trying to get him comfortable, trying to get him the ball. And you can't help but wonder, at least a little bit, with the continuity that existed last year when there was so much success, especially among that starting unit, and this has come up, is it worth experimenting with Hayward off the bench so that you can keep that starting group together when it had, all that run when Kyrie Irving was still healthy the first 3 quarters of the year, and Hayward can maybe work on finding his offense, finding his shot with that second group?
So my philosophy has always been, when that first unit has shown, when we've seen the glimpses of that first unit, it's been really good. And even dating back to last year, the last preseason game in Charlotte, like, to me, that's your best 5, and you just have to be committed to working through the bumps. And I know it would be easy for the Celtics to sort of just be like, all right, it's not working right now. Let's wait. Let's let Gordon work this out. But I just don't know if there's a positive in that. I don't think Brad cares about losing some early season games. Like, sure, he wants this team to be playing better. He wants to be competing for the top seed in the East. But if the pain point is, losing a couple games you should have won while figuring this thing out a little bit quicker, I don't think that's the worst thing. I do think there's ways you can do both in terms of, I'd like to see Brad get Gordon out of there early, get him back in there with the second unit, which I think, in general, is what they should do anyway, because Gordon's such a good ball handler and creator that he's going to naturally get better looks for Marcus Morris, and he's going to take pressure off Terry Rozier handling the ball, and Marcus Smart can play off the ball. And, it allows everybody to sort of have some more freedom when he's out there. And listen, but I just think as Gordon gets closer to being the player that we know he can be, he is so important to that first unit. And that 5 is so important because that's what makes them so different. It's really tough. And I think Kyrie said this after that Portland loss. It's like, when you look at that first unit, they create so many problems for other teams with their versatility, with the way that everybody can kind of create off the dribble, can get their own shot. Think back 2 years ago when Isaiah Thomas was scoring 50 points in the playoffs. Celtics had nobody else who could score or create their own shot. Now they've got 5 guys. We're at the complete opposite end of the problem spectrum. But if they can figure that out, if they all can figure out how to coexist, how this all works, I mean, if they can harness what they showed that first quarter in Denver, this team is going to be really, really good. And I think they're just going to endure the bumps in the road while getting to that point. I think we're sort of at a point now where again, with Gordon's minutes starting to stretch out, it's just going to become a little bit easier for Brad to see how this all works together.
We'll get to some of the league-wide issues in a little bit, but we did get a bunch of questions on social media, as you probably saw as well. Ooh. And, some of them dealt with Hayward. I think you kind of just hit on one of them because Matt wanted to know about just should we get him more playmaking – should the Celtics get him more playmaking duties? But related, Finian said, how long do you think it'll take Hayward to get back, not just to form, but to his all-star form, if he is capable of that?
Yeah, I'd say we'll probably start seeing a more consistent Gordon Hayward by, the middle of next month. I don't know if we'll see, full-on Gordon Hayward until – I don't know. Maybe I would say I'll give him a lot of leash. I think you probably won't see the same explosion, the same confidence until maybe January or February because I just think it takes time, and I don't want to give him – I've said this for the Celtics as a whole. I don't want to give them the excuse of, hey, they're trying to figure this out. But, I sit back, and one of the things I do is I laugh when we're sitting there in February and March of last year, and we're peppering Brad Stevens with questions every day about, is Gordon coming back? Is Gordon coming back? In hindsight, it's so silly because, imagine if they had rushed him back at that point and how probably bad he would have been and how not ready he would have been. It's just tough to come back from an injury like that and being away for so long and to do it all while figuring yourself out on a team that's, getting two guys back, two all-stars back to a team that was really good. So I just think all those factors at play, it's going to take some time. And I think that people need to be patient with that as long as they figure it out by April and March, that's okay. And that's why when people start worrying about seeding right now, I kind of chuckle. I do agree. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have to go on the road to both Toronto and Milwaukee in the playoffs. But if the Celtics are as good as we think they can be, that probably shouldn't be an issue. They should still be able to win those sort of series with the talent they've got.
Look, man, you're preaching to the choir. I've been saying on this show for literally months that I just don't think it's fair or reasonable to judge Hayward before February. I think that's sort of the benchmark of, okay, the guy missed an entire year, couldn't run, couldn't do anything basketball activities-wise, shoot standing up or out of a chair. If you want to evaluate him running, jumping, cutting, pivoting, crossing over, whatever it may be, you need to give that time for him to get comfortable. And some people say it takes an entire year. It might be, quite frankly, it might even be unfair to say February, but I think that's your benchmark. To look at him in mid-November and say, boy, he isn't an all-star, well, no crap. He's not an all-star. He wasn't. Of course not. Never mind just trying to figure out. I think it also might be, we don't need to spend time on this. We'll get to more questions, but it might also be different if, the environment, if he suffers that injury and he's going back to the same team and system, et cetera, and everything, environment, whatever, that he's used to in Utah versus starting brand new in Boston, which is effectively what he's doing because year one he played 5 minutes, that speeds up everything as well. So he's behind the eight ball in just about every imaginable way, short of playing for Brad Stevens, who he's used to. God forbid it was like he went to Miami and it's Eric Spoelstra, and then everything is different. So at least there's some familiarity, but that's sort of how I fall on the issue.
I'm with you on everything, and I just think people forget how good Gordon Hayward could be. We haven't seen anything anywhere near close to that. When he, even if he gets back to 75, 80% of himself by the end of the year, man, that's a really good player, and I think everyone should be excited for the Celtics when that happens and if that happens.
One more quick break to tell you today's show is brought to you by The Athletic. If you haven't heard about The Athletic by now, you must be living under a rock. I mean, these guys have been crushing every element of sports coverage imaginable. Whether you're looking for specific local coverage with beat guys, sports discussed under a national lens, or anything in between, you got to make sure you take a look at The Athletic. No pop-ups, no ads, just high-quality content waiting behind every single click. The Celtics beat, and of course, I mean the beat, not the specific show. It's stacked with great writers. Jay King, he wrote a piece recently about Marcus Smart and how he's handling an emotional roller coaster of a year, a terrific piece you should check out. And there's Jared Weiss, he's been on this show. He used to work for CLNS. Absolutely stacked coverage. You cannot get content like this anywhere else. 600 to 750 new articles every single week. I mean, who is pushing out quality content like that? If you haven't signed up yet, take advantage of this deal because it's not going to last forever. Go to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat to get 40% off your monthly subscription. That's a subscription for less than $3 a month just by going to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. How easy is that? Jay King, Jared Weiss, Sham Charania, he hopefully will be on this show sometime soon, and more, all for less than $3 a month. I mean, really? Sign me up. Heck, sign yourself up too at theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. All right, back to the show. So from Kyle, and I love this one. I was going to ask you about it anyway, so I'm glad he did. Can Marcus Smart become I wasn't going to ask this question, but related to it. Can Marcus Smart become the franchise leader in three-pointers made? He's now in the top 10. Now, before you even answer, I will say that Paul Pierce hit over 1,800. Marcus Smart is at 333. No, that is absolutely, he's not going to sniff Antoine Walker, who has half of Pierce's total, in second place. But he is only 15 behind Danny Ainge, at least as we talk right now, for ninth place in franchise history. And as you know, you said it earlier, longest tenured Celtic, but it's still just year 5. And a lot of this speaks to the era of the NBA that we're in, where three-pointers are being hoisted like crazy. I think he's already 8th in attempts in franchise history. But still, this is a guy who generally, at least percentage-wise, sucks from three. He's a 29% three-point shooter. He's 27% this year. Say what you want about his hot streaks or his form. Can you believe that Marcus Smart ranks 10th all-time in made three-pointers in Celtics history?
Yeah, you know, I think I was looking at the list last night, and he's going to catch not only Danny, but he's probably going to catch like Dana Barros, who you think of as a really good three-point
prolific,
shooter, really good scorer. You know, that's kind of jarring to me. I do think, you know, if let's say Marcus spends his entire career with the Celtics, he might get close to the attempts record based on, you know, the way he shoots. And that's jarring. But listen, that's, again, I go back to it. That's what I love about him, is that he just, you know, he doesn't recognize that he probably shouldn't be taking those shots all the time. I do think he's been better this year. I think one of the things we thought coming into the season is, is Marcus Morris and Marcus Smart, are they just going to, you know, fire away with that second unit? Are they going to know? But they've been some of the better ones to sort of identify where their best attempts come from, and that's really encouraging. Marcus has sort of embraced being a facilitator and a creator, and that's what that second unit needs. And so, but yeah, like to see him even on that list, it just speaks to where the game is going, and like how much that 3-point shot wasn't a part of the former era. But man, yeah, when people look back 30 years from now and see Marcus Smart at like number 6 or 7, it's gonna, you know, there's gonna be some questions asked about how that happened.
I heard Danny Ainge on the radio this week too saying that, look, he didn't even really start taking 3-pointers until his 4th or 5th year in the league because it was so new. And if he played in today's NBA, I mean, he'd be right up there at the top of the franchise with at least attempts, and he'd probably hit more than Antoine Walker. So it is. I love the NBA. You know I love the NBA. I do hate the style of play in today's NBA, but that's a whole longer conversation. That I grew up on 90s basketball. I miss and I love 90s basketball, but we'll save that for another time. Let's do some more questions. Do you think Al Horford will accept his player option next year, or do you think the team is going to work out a longer-term deal with him that benefits both parties? That's from Nick.
Yeah, I think part of it will come down to what happens this season in terms of, okay, are the Celtics, as currently constructed, are they truly a title contender? And I think we think they are now. You know, maybe we find out differently as the season goes along. I'll be interested to see the level that Al sort of plays with. He had a bad road trip, but there's nothing that suggests that Al Horford won't be worth whatever the value he'll command. I do think it would be beneficial to the Celtics with tax-related concerns coming up. If they could get Al to go down to, you know, $18-20 million a year, whatever it would take, if they could give him some security in years. When I was talking to Al before the season about Kyrie saying he wants to be back, I sort of said, have you considered your future? And he didn't kind of want to get into it, but I think what he would say is that, like, listen, he loves Boston. He loves what they're building. He wants to be a part of it. I can certainly see a situation where he goes to his agent and says, hey, like, you know, I know we're giving up some money this year, but like, let's opt out. Let's get some security. Like, let's know that my family is going to be here for the rest of my playing days. And there's a value that comes with that. I think we've seen it with Kyrie, you know, once he made that announcement, it takes a lot of the pressure off, a lot of the questions off. I think Al would benefit greatly, and the Celtics would benefit greatly if Al can be that player. It just comes down to, how does the market look and who's available and could that money be used elsewhere? I mean, but it gets tricky just because it's so much easier to re-sign your own players than it is to try and figure out how to incorporate, how to go sign someone else with the money they have committed right now.
When the Globe's Adam Himmelsbach was on for our season preview show, one of the things that we talked about was potential sixth man of the year candidates. And for Boston, of course, the guys that we naturally talked about at the time were Terry Rozier and maybe Marcus Smart. The guy we did not talk about is the one that Michaela wants to know about, who's the most obvious candidate, at least of those three. That's Marcus Morris. Do you think he could be a serious candidate for sixth man of the year in the league?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we know is that a lot of the voting for those sort of awards comes down to teams that do well. And so if the Celtics are one of the top 4 teams in the league by the end of the year, then naturally you're going to look and say, okay, who beyond the starting lineup contributed here? And Marcus Morris has been awesome. They don't win that game in Phoenix without his buzzer beater. They don't win a lot of the games earlier in the year without his scoring. What's interesting to me is I think going into the year, I sort of thought in my mind, okay, someone has to go before the end of the year. I think part of it would be not only the talent logjam and that there just wasn't going to be enough minutes for, whether it's 9 guys or whatever, but more so the luxury tax concern where, the Celtics are about $3-4 million over right now. If they make a move before the end of the season, they can get below. It saves them a ton of money down the road. The thing that's thrown a wrench in all of it is that if ultimately you need all these guys, if you need Terry and Marcus and both Marcuses to be successful, then I don't know if there's an obvious move. So going into the year, I sort of thought maybe Marcus Morris was the most likely to get moved, a guy who is going to be a free agent who you don't have really any chance to bring back because of the money he'll command, especially with his recent agency switch and what they're going to demand. So I just felt like he was one of the guys that maybe was most likely to be traded. Now I'm not so sure because he's been really important. We talked about it earlier, like the leadership voice that he provides. Marcus Morris could be a really integral part of this success, and if he is, he's naturally going to land in that six-man conversation.
In terms of trying to figure out the financials of everything, and I'm kind of asking you to look into your crystal ball, something that you'll start to think about probably in the next month or, less than 2, really, with the trade deadline being moved up. And don't even worry about the buyout market. Michael wants to know, and I think a lot of people are wondering, especially among these how can the Celtics improve type questions float around right now, are there any realistic trade targets you think that are out there, guys that we should be thinking about?
See, I don't see any. In years past, we said like, oh, okay, they need another shooter off the bench or they need another big man. I don't see any glaring needs right now. In fact, I think it's almost the opposite. I think it's more likely that there might become a point where you just say, like, Brad, just as Gordon Hayward's minutes stretch out, there's just not enough time for everybody to go around. Is the more likely move subtracting someone, either adding more assets for the future, trying to cut salary, like things that can help your team beyond on the court this season. Now, listen, we might have an injury along the way, and that'll change the narrative about what they need to pursue and what they need for help. But Brad Wanamaker hasn't been able to get on the court. We saw there's always been Phil Pressey and Shane Larkin minutes in years past, so they're pretty set there, obviously, at ball handlers. There's no lack of shooting and wing depth this year, and Robert Williams hasn't been able to get on the court, and he's as athletic and intriguing of a big man as they've drafted. And so I think it's more likely that if things continue to progress as they have, that the only moves I can see them making are either moving one of their rotation guys in order to thin out the numbers and get under the luxury tax, or maybe it goes back to adding a veteran. And I don't think that's necessarily a trade. I think that's more likely to be a buyout and just trying to add another voice or someone who's been through it, has championship experience, and who can just kind of give you more off the court than necessarily what they would give you on the court.
Jacob here is obviously a hashtag Forsberg fan. He wants to know, generally, what do people like more, your hair or your dad jokes?
I mean, I don't want to go all Evan Turner here and start shooting my own horn, but I think both are pretty great.
How do you choose?
Right? It's almost impossible. I think more people like making fun of the dad jokes than they do the hair, which is understandable. The hair is great.
All right, one more question from at least a listener, and then we can mix in some of the league stuff before I let you go, and this one will segue into that. Ray and several others asked, and it's as delusional a question as there is. I don't fault them for asking it, though, because it was out there. Glenn Big Baby Davis thinks that Kevin Durant is going to come to Boston. What do you think?
Listen, I've watched Big Baby chow down on chicken with a briefcase full of money on a plane, and I tend to take him at his word. He's still plugged in. He still knows people around the league. He hears things. I don't think it's likely. But, the one thing I say to this all the time is when people ask me about, Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant and, how, what else are the Celtics going to get? One, I think it's kind of funny because, the Celtics are loaded right now and people still want more. It's enjoy what you've got. On the other hand, I know that the Celtics front office doesn't sit there and just be content. And so if things fizzle with the Warriors, whether it's Durant or Clay or Draymond or whatever, it's if they make a move, the Celtics still have assets. They still have the means to make crazy moves like that. In my mind, without crunching the numbers, I don't see how there's really any way possible, short of Durant taking a real discount, that to make all that work just as a free agent signing, but sign and trade or whatever. There's plenty of mastications that you can figure that out. I don't think Danny Ainge ever settles and says I'm not going to go after these guys. The first iteration of this was supposed to be Kevin Durant and Al Horford when they made that first summer pitch. So he'll shoot for the moon. That doesn't mean it's likely. I think Glenn Davis still bleeds a little bit of green and is hopeful for his former team, but I don't think he's necessarily plugged in about where Kevin Durant is going.
We don't really have the proper time that this discussion warrants, so I don't know, a quick fleeting question, I suppose, but this Warriors situation between KD and Draymond and all that's behind the scenes that we're just starting to kind of learn about and really dates back to last year and the mess that was always alluded to but never quite described is fascinating. And it probably will, it seems, lead to an end of a dynasty quicker than it necessarily should. And maybe that's as soon as this coming off season. But I think the most important thing to remember, and maybe you disagree with this, is there's still just so much talent there that I don't care if Kevin Durant and Draymond Green get along. I believe them. I take them both at their word when they say that is not going to get in the way of them winning a championship this year.
Oh, of course. And actually, I think this is bad for the rest of the NBA because I feel like the biggest thing that could derail the Warriors dynasty was going to be boredom, that guys would sit there and say, this is coming too easy and would want their own situations. And maybe maybe Clay would want to go somewhere else. Maybe Durant would say, this has been fun. I got my rings. Now I'm going to go to New York, just try another challenge. Whereas this, all of a sudden, now they've got something to play for. Now everyone's looking at them saying, oh, the dynasty is over. This is going to bring that. Now I think they're going to rally around it somehow. And like you said, they're just too damn talented to not have that success. So, part of me is go ahead and start thinking it's the demise. I think it's the complete opposite. I think it's only going to inspire them somehow. Clearly not the other night against the Rockets, but I think they're gonna find some unity behind this, that winning cures all, and it'll be kumbaya by the end of the year. And listen, I don't know if it still might. Durant might still get free agency and say, I'm just sick of this. I don't want to deal with this guy anymore. This is I'm going to go find something else. But I think there's still a very good chance that they get to next summer and everyone looks around and says, why would we want to go anywhere else? We're just dominating the league. We're going to a sparkly new arena. This is kind of fun. That we shouldn't just presume the demise of this dynasty.
Let's wrap quickly here with some Sixers talk because we really haven't even talked about Jimmy Butler and the fact that he's there. And I'll tell you what, just my view, I'm not convinced it was the right move for the Sixers for personality reasons. We know that he has struggled with young, talented guys very recently in Minnesota, leaving Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins behind for Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and whatever it is that Markelle Fultz turns out to be. But they've sacrificed some shooting. They lose Šarić, they lose Covington, they lose the ability to even go out and probably get a guy who is a good shooter short of, trading for a Kyle Korver or something like that. So the team is very one-dimensional in that aspect of its offense. But where I also say I don't quite think it's the right move for them, I do feel like it was the necessary one because I think Philly looked at things and said this is an available all-star who we can acquire at a relatively cheap cost, and we know that we are not as presently constituted good enough to beat Boston or Toronto.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, they had to make the move. That, like, this is the post-process era, right? Like, all right, we're not content to just wait another year and take our chances in free agency after they whiffed this past summer. I felt like they had to do something. And in the same breath, I don't think they fixed their biggest problem, which is they need more shooting, like, to complement the talent they've got. Like, Embiid is otherworldly. Ben Simmons is Magic Johnson without a jump shot. And, like, Jimmy Butler, here's the one thing I'll say. I am not as sold on Jimmy Butler as what seems like the rest of the NBA world. You know, what has Jimmy Butler done in the postseason, or what has Jimmy Butler done with young cores that leads anyone to believe that he will be this ultimate difference maker?
To that end, not to cut you off, I don't understand how there's anybody out there that believes Jimmy Butler's a top 10 player in the NBA.
I get real cringy. Like, we were having this discussion on the podcast yesterday, our Celtics Talk podcast, about, you know, the Sixers now have 3 top 20 guys. And, you know, I think it was Sherrod who was leery of putting Ben Simmons in the top 20. For me, you know, like, if I was drafting, I don't know if Jimmy Butler's in my top 20.
No,
and part of that's like age,
maybe like
and,
2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I think it's telling, you know, that the Celtics had multiple opportunities to go get Jimmy Butler. And ultimately they decided that they wanted Jaylen Brown and other young players more than they wanted Jimmy Butler. I think he's a very good player. I don't want to discount what he can do. I just don't think he's the sort of player that you get and you go to another level. Like, why couldn't he get the most out of Minnesota? What leads us to believe that it'll be any different with Philadelphia? Now, listen, the Sixers might go out. They might get a bunch of shooters if they get Korver, if they got Redick now. I mean, like, you know, all of a sudden they're going to be very good. But to me, the most of their success will be because of Embiid and Simmons. I'll be fascinated to see how it all works together. It didn't look great the first night, but, you know, that happens. I'm not going to really come down hard on them and lose to the Magic. Like, the Celtics did the same thing. So that happens. But, like, how does it all fit? I don't think Jimmy Butler is as bad of a teammate as people made it out to be. He had a really bad situation, or he let it play out really badly in Minnesota. And I think that caused people to just sort of look at him in a different way. But I don't necessarily think he's going to come in there and, like, make Markelle Fultz cry, as everyone seems to think. So, but it is